There would be no end-of-summer picnic up at the South Mountain Reservation on Labor Day that year because all of my parents' metropolitan friends had left Newark with their boys by September to settle in around the country before the start of the school year. One by one throughout the summer, each of the families drove up on a Saturday to visit and say goodbye. It was awful for my parents, who alone of the group from the local metropolitan district designated for relocation by Homeland 42 had chosen to stay where we were. These were their dearest friends, and the hot Saturday afternoons, with the tearful adults embracing out on the street, while the children forlornly looked on, afternoons that ended with the four of us who were remaining behind waving goodbyes from the curb as my mother called after the departing car, "Don't forget to write," were the most harrowing moments so far, when our defenselessness became real to me, and I sensed the beginning of the destruction of our world. And when I realized that my father, of all these men, was the most obstinate, helplessly bonded to his better instincts and their excessive demands, I only then understood that he had quit his job not merely because he was fearful of what awaited us down the line should we agree like the others to be relocated, but because, for better or worse, when he was bullied by superior forces that he deemed corrupt, it was his nature not to yield. In this instance, to resist either running away to Canada, as my mother urged our doing, or bowing to a government directive that was patently unjust. There were two types of strong men, those like Uncle Monty and Abe Steinheim, remorseless about their making money, and those like my father, ruthlessly obedient to their idea of fair play. "Come," my father said, trying to perk us up on the Saturday when the last of the 6 homesteading families had seemingly vanished forever. "Come on, boys. We're going out for ice cream." The 4 of us walked down Chancellor to the drugstore, where the pharmacist was one of his oldest insurance customers, and where in summertime it was generally more pleasant than it was out on the street. What with the awnings unfurled to prevent the sun's rays from piercing the plate glass window, and the paddle blades of the 3 ceiling fans creaking softly as they revolved overhead, we slipped into a booth and ordered sundaes, and though my mother could not bring herself to eat despite my father's prompting, she was able eventually to stop the tears from running down her face. We, after all, were no less enjoined to an unknowable future than were our exiled friends, and so we sat spooning our sundaes in the awninged semi-darkness of the cool pharmacy, everyone speechless and completely spent, until my mother at last looked up from the paper napkin she was neatly shredding, and with that wry, stripped-down smile that comes when one is entirely cried out, said to my father, "Well, like it or not, Lindbergh is teaching us what it is to be Jews." Then she added, "We only think we're Americans." "Nonsense! No," my father replied. "They think we only think we're Americans. It is not up for discussion, Bess. It is not up for negotiation. These people are not understanding that I take this for granted. God damn it! Others? He dares to call us others? He's the other, the one who looks the most American, and he's the one who is least American. The man is unfit. He shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be there, and it's as simple as that." For me, the hardest departure to stomach was Selden's. Of course I was delighted to see him go. All summer long I'd been counting the days. Yet that early morning in the week of August, when the Wishnows drove off, with 2 mattresses strapped to the car roof, lifted there and tied down beneath a tarp that night before by my father and Sandy, and clothing jammed to the top of the old Plymouth's back seat, stacks of clothing including several items of my own that my mother and I had helped them carry from the house. I was the one, grotesquely enough, who couldn't stop crying. I was remembering an afternoon when Selden and I were just 6 years old, and Mr. Wishnow was alive and seemingly well and still working every day for the Metropolitan, and Mrs. Wishnow was still a housewife like my mother, absorbed by her family's everyday needs, and even on occasion looking after me if my mother had to be off doing her PTA work and Sandy wasn't around, and I was home by myself after school. I was remembering the generic maternalism that she shared with my mother, the succoring warmth I wallowed in as a matter of course, and that I experienced so strikingly on the afternoon that I got stuck in their bathroom and couldn't get out. I was remembering how kind she'd been to me while I repeatedly tried and failed to open the door, spontaneously caring for me as though, regardless of differences in appearance and temperament and immediate circumstance, the four of us, Selden and Selma, Philip and Bess, were all one and the same. I was remembering Mrs. Wishnow when what was uppermost in her mind was what was uppermost in my mother's mind, back when she was just another watchful member of the local matriarchy whose overriding task was to establish a domestic way of life for the next generation. I was remembering Mrs. Wishnow unperturbed, with when her fists weren't clenched and her face full of pain. It was a small bathroom, exactly like ours, quite confining, the door next to the toilet, and the toilet abutting a sink, and a bathtub squeezed in beside that. I pulled on the door, but it didn't open. At home, I would have just closed it behind me, but at the Wishnows, I locked it, something I'd never done before in my life. I locked it, and I peed, and I flushed, and I washed my hands, and, because I didn't want to touch their towel, wiped them dry on the back legs of my corduroys. Everything was fine, and then I went to exit the bathroom, and I couldn't undo the lock above the doorknob. I could turn it a little ways, but then it would catch and stop. I didn't bang on the door or rattle the doorknob. I just kept trying to turn the lock as quietly as I could, but it wouldn't go, and so I sat back down the toilet, and I thought that maybe it would somehow work itself out. I sat there for a while, but then I got lonesome and stood up and tried the lock again, but it wouldn't uncatch. I started to knock lightly on the door, and Mrs. Wishnow came and said, "Oh, the lock on the door does that sometimes. You have to turn it like this." She explained how to do it, but I still couldn't get it open. And so, very carefully, she said, "No, Philip, while you're turning it, you have to pull it back." And though I tried to do as she told me, it didn't work. "Dear," she said, "turn and back simultaneously. Turn and back at the same time." "Which way is back?" I said. Back toward the wall." "Oh, the wall, okay," I said, but I couldn't get it right, no matter what I did. "It won't work," I said, and I began to sweat, and then I heard Selden. "Philip, it's Selden. Why did you lock it? We weren't going to come in." "I didn't say you were," I said. "Then why did you lock it?" "I don't know," I said. "Do you think we should call the fire department, Mom? They can get him out with a ladder." No, Mrs. Wishnow said. "Come on, Philip." "Come on, Philip," Selden said. "It's not that hard." "But it is. It's stuck." "How's he going to get out, Ma?" "Selden, be still." "Philip?" "Yes. Are you all right?" "Well, it's hot in here. It's getting hot." "Take a glass of cold water, dear. There's a glass in the medicine cabinet. Take a glass of water and slowly drink it, and you'll be fine." "Okay." But the glass had something slimy at the bottom, and though I took it out, I only pretended to drink from it, and drank instead from my cupped hands. "Ma," Selden said, "what's he doing wrong?" "Philip, what are you doing wrong?" "How do I know?" I said, "Mrs. Wishnow? Mrs. Wishnow?" "Yes, dear." "It's getting too hot in here. I'm really starting to sweat." "Then open the window. Open the little window in the shower." "Are you tall enough to do that?" "I think so." I took off my shoes and stepped into the shower in just my socks, and standing on my tiptoes I was able to reach the window, a smallish window of pebbled glass that looked into the alleyway. But when I tried to open it, it was stuck too. "It won't go," I said. "Bang on it a little, dear. Bang the frame at the bottom, but not too hard, and I'm sure it will open." I did as she told me, but I couldn't get it to budge. By now, my shirt was saturated with sweat, and so I angled myself to be able to give the window a good strong shove upward, but in turning I must have struck the shower handle with my elbow because suddenly the water was on. "Oh, no!" I said, and ice-cold water was pouring over my head and down the back of my shirt. I jumped out of the shower onto the tile floor. "What happened, dear?" "The shower started." "How?" Selden said. "How could the shower start?" "I don't know." "Are you very wet?" she asked me. "Sort of." "Get a towel," she told me. "Get a towel out of the closet." The towels are in the closet. We had the same narrow little bathroom closet directly upstairs over the Wishnow's bathroom closet. And we used it for towels too, but when I went to open theirs, I couldn't. The door was stuck. I yanked, but it wouldn't open. "What is it now, Philip?" I couldn't tell her. "Did you take a towel?" "Yes." "Then dry yourself off, And you must stay calm. There's nothing to worry about. I am calm. Sit down. Sit down and dry yourself off. I was soaking wet, and now the floor was getting wet. I sat on the toilet seat, and that's when I saw a bathroom for what it is, the upper end of a sewer, and that's when I felt the tears began to well up. Don't worry, Selden called to me. Your mother and father will be home soon. But how will I get out? And all at once the door was open, and there was Selden, and behind him his mother. How'd you do that? I said. I opened the door, he said. But how? He shrugged. I just pushed it. It was open all the time. And that was when I began to bawl, and Mrs. Wishnow took me in her arms and said, That's okay. Things like this happen. They can happen to anyone. It was open, Ma, Selden said to her. Shh, she told him. Shh, it doesn't matter. And then she came into the bathroom and turned off the cold water, which was now streaming into the tub. And without any problem, she opened the closet door and took out a fresh towel and began to dry my hair and my face and my neck, and all the while gently telling me that it didn't matter and that these things happened to people all the time, but that was long before everything else went wrong. And we'll pause there.